G'day, it's Rob here again. Well, anyone that's watched my videos knows that I'm a huge fan of bronze brazing, manganese bronze brazing. And I've got this Bullfinch Auto Brazing System. It's a torch made in the UK. And I use that to do manganese bronze brazing using standard LPG, no oxygen cylinder required. It's one of the few torches, well, probably the only torch I've seen that can actually do that. It can actually do a proper job of brazing with bronze rod and not silver solder. I mean, it'll do silver solder fine, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about manganese bronze brazing, which is quite a few hundred degrees hotter. On the left, we've got the old Primus torch that I've had for years. It's just a torch that, you know, you use for stripping off paint and heating up metal red hot and bending it, and yeah, it won't quite bronze braze because it just, even though both of those torches have probably got similar BTHU outputs, I couldn't say for sure. It's the way that it's delivered that counts, and the narrower, more directed flame pattern of the Bullfinch and the higher temperature it puts out too make a big difference. So even though, you know, you've got all these BTHUs in the world, if you can't direct them where you want them and concentrate them, they're not going to do the job. Now, the problem with the Bullfinch is that it's very expensive. To buy that torch, the regulator, and the tip is $399 Australian at the moment. That's a lot of bread. It's a lot of bread. And of course, your old Primus type torches, you can pick them up second hand for like $10. You know, they're good handy torch to have. And so I sometimes use that to give this a boost. You know, use it for preheating and then do the main brazing with the Bullfinch if it's a big item. So what am I coming to? Okay, $400. So I was looking on Banggood, and they're always getting new stuff in, and you know, they've got all sorts of stuff there. And blow me down, they've now got an LPG torch, and it shows pictures of it brazing and or silver soldering. It doesn't say what it is, but yeah, do all sorts of remarkable things. And the price is $45. $45, that Australian, and that's 10% of what that torch there costs. Now that is built to an industrial standard, and I don't expect that the Banggood one is, and it doesn't say anything about it. But it does have some photos there that look interesting, and I'll show you the screen grabs, and yeah, have a look at them all. There's quite a number of them, and then I'll point out some discrepancies that are in the advert. Okay, check this out. So here it is. It's basically as the web pages describe, except there's one major issue. And so yeah, you get some hose and quite a good length of it, and then you get the torch. But you know, anybody notice what's happening here? The torch. Well, that's the torch. But when you look at the actual page that describes it, they show two versions of the torch, and I'll show you what I mean. So they show this version, which is what I've got, okay, what I've got, and appears to have looks like a die-cast head, and then it's got a tip, a fixed tip, non-adjustable tip. All right, okay. But further down the page, you see that they show this torch, which has got an all copper head. And it's got an adjustable, looks like an adjustable choke for the air mixture. I presume that, you know, this one you rotate it or slide it and you can vary the amount of air coming in. Well, why I'd want to do that is beyond me, because generally these things are jetted for maximum performance. So that's a bit of a weird situation. I mean, it would vary the temperature, but why would you want to do that? Wouldn't you want the maximum temperature? But the fact of the matter is that this is different to this. So we're off to, you know, we're off to a start that I expected, you know. And also this is all metal, and this is like plastic. So yeah, I'm a bit, you know, a bit dubious about this whole setup. Whether it performs or not is the big question, and it doesn't matter what it's made out of as long as it does the job. And the price is dirt cheap compared to a Bullfinch, but of course this is not industrial quality machine. I mean, that's only plastic, and if you threw this around you're definitely going to break it or, you know, do some damage to it. This is all aluminium, but it could be a good torch, you don't know. The tip is unusual. I've never used one with that sort of flame torch. So yeah, what's the pattern going to be like? How big is it going to be? Yeah, I'm really interested. But I mean, I'm not, you know, getting my hopes raised up too high. Now there's another issue too. They show the connector as being all brass, all copper. What is it? Anyway, it's metal, and it's got a rubber ring on it, and it's a pretty primitive sort of a connector. It's not the sort of connector I would use. It certainly wouldn't meet Australian standards, I don't think. But anyway, so you get a bag of bits and pieces, and in the bag you get 4 hose clips for the hose, 2 at each end, and then you get this. So this is basically meant to screw onto your gas cylinder, like that. So it screws on left-hand thread, and it's supposed to have a rubber seal around there. No rubber seal. Even so, I wouldn't use that. I think that's it's a bit of a disaster waiting to happen there. I mean, you know, if you've got any now, you'll use the correct type fittings, which are like that. You know, you've got a good solid O-ring tapered seal. I mean, that would be, I think that the gas people would be horrified to see that sort of fitting being sold. And yeah, I've got no intention of using that. What I will do though is I'll braze this fitting onto another fitting I've got, and that way I can then use another standard Australian type, well, world type connector. You can't expect too much, but even if it won't bronze braze, I mean, for that sort of money, I mean, that is pretty damn cheap, depending of course on what the flame output's like, you know. I'm hoping it would have some real mumbo, but you just don't know, you know. This is a pretty simple setup. Okay, I'll make up the adapter, and then we can try this baby out. Well, when I looked more closely at what was in the bag, what I assumed to be some sort of, I wasn't sure what it was, some sort of spacer, turns out to be that they actually gave us 2 seals for that connector. So the fitting that I sort of was pretty dubious about, because, you know, when I thought I had no seals, no conical seals, I thought, oh well, I'll just have to, you know, use a proper POL connector like that. As it turns out, these will actually be the right ones, and they'll do the job. So you can use that connector that they give you. This does screw into the pole fitting on the tank. I tried it, so it's all good. But it's too late for me to actually go back to that, because I've already brazed the fitting onto a connector to go onto this more heavy duty pole fitting. Doesn't matter. I'm just pointing out though that, yeah, the fitting they give you will do the job, no problem whatsoever. It's just like a big camp stove fitting, really. This is the more common type. This is, you know, what you would normally get on most 9 kg bottles in Australia. All right, I'll wire buff this, clean it all up, hook it onto there with some tape, and then we can hook on the hoses. You get 2 clamps for each end, stainless steel. And then we can have a close look at the torch, compare, you know, just look at it, see how it compares to the other two types of torches that I've got. Moving right along. Right, well, I've hooked up the pole connector, that's all done. Turned out okay. Two of the clamps, you get 3 metres of hose, that's about 9 foot. It's got Chinese writing on it. I tried to run it through my translator and it's just company information. There's no rating on this hose, whether it's LPG rated. You just have to assume it is. Because, you know, hoses aren't all the same, you know. You can't use acetylene hoses for LPG, even though a lot of people do. And, yeah, well, that's not the right thing. Now, they say this is explosion proof. I hope so. And now it's just a matter of, let's have a close look at these. The three sorts of guns I've got, or torches I've got, and we can just see the difference. Right, moving on. Right, well here's the three torches. Here's the Bullfinch. This has a jet here. The LPG goes through into this section here. It also does a bit of a feed in through the back of this section from memory. And it goes through and it uses a cavitation effect. It's got a cavitator in there which causes tumbling of the gases, swirling, and then you get a very tight flame coming out the end. It's not your typical double or triple cone flame, it's a bit different. So there's nothing in the end, it's just a tube of the right dimension. All the action goes on here with this cavitator. Now the old style plain old torches like this, they have a jet in the on-off section here from memory. Pretty sure it's in there. Or maybe it's in here. Yeah, I think it's actually in here. So that it bleeds through the set amount of LPG. It mixes in air, and these ports here determine the mix ratio. And it also sucks in more air from the back here to get the thing up to high temperature. So it's got nothing in there, it's a tube. So it's a very simple thing, just a jet and some ports to mix in some air, and at the end you get a hot flame. Now this one's a bit different. The new boy on the block, it's got a jet here. So the LPG comes up through here, through the jet, and then it's sucking in, it's obviously just sucking in air through these ports at the back, where the section is a port. And it goes through here, and I don't really know what's inside. I could pull it apart, but I don't want to risk breaking it, because it's got piezo electronic ignition, which has got a fine wire in there. But you can see it's got a multi-tube end on it. So rather than one big fluffy flame, it's going to have, I suppose, that plus a lot of little flames. But see, these aren't connected to the jet. The jet is standalone, and I can't see that there's any feed through here. So I really don't understand what's happening here. It's doing something with the air LPG mixture, which is coming from here. I've never seen a tip like that before, you know. So all we can do now is try it out. Now it's got a piezo action to fire it up, and this valve here is purely a bleed control for how much you want. And so, you know, you can turn it off completely or turn it on full bore. And I mean, the Bullfinch has something similar, but you always have it on full bore because you want maximum heat naturally, you know. And it's only on very fine jetted torches that you would actually use this knob, where you want to do something really fine and you want to get that flame tip right down small. But for regular brazing, yeah, you want a full bottle, and yeah, what more can I say? So now it's a matter of, I suppose, give it a go. Now, in the write-up it says it's got full copper head, but I mean it hasn't. This section here is copper. This is die-cast aluminium of some sort. Of course this is plastic, wouldn't stand a lot of mistreatment. That damn dove's out there again. Horny little devil he is. Hasn't been here for a while. The crows have been frightening them away, which is a good thing. Because the old crows, they raid their nests, and it's lunchtime, guys. We're having some baby dove today. And yeah, so they're handy to have around. Where was I? Oh yes, I'm deviating. So now, yeah. Now these torches, in the literature they claim up to 1300 degrees Celsius, but that is the normal LPG maximum temperature. 1300 degrees Celsius is it. What the actual torch tip temperature is going to be is anybody's guess. You know, for the Bullfinch I think they quote about 950 degrees centigrade, and that is up to 1200 depending on the conditions. So, you know, wow, I don't know. This torch is supposedly about 250 degrees hotter than this torch. So your standard LPG only goes to 650, I think. So this is the mystery machine, and now it's just a matter of we'll hook it up and we'll check out the flame pattern and see what it looks like. Oh, also, the Bullfinch uses a regulator because it requires a controlled gas pressure. But with the normal old style torches, you don't need a regulator. This doesn't use a regulator, which makes me think it's going to have a similar action. I reckon these two are going to be very similar. I reckon it's going to be a similar sort of flame, similar sort of temperature, and I'm not getting my hopes up. Rightio, let's give it a go, eh? See if it does what it's supposed to do. Turn her on. Let's see that show. Full bore. The piezo is not working. The piezo, what do they call them? The automatic lighter. She no work. Okay. Pretty beefy. Well, apart from the electronic ignition not working, the flame pattern looks pretty interesting. It's not as fluffy as on the old Primus, but it's bigger than on the Bullfinch. So once we figured out where the hottest part of the flame was, it worked okay. On the Bullfinch, the hottest part of the flame is actually right up close to the chip because it uses a totally different flame shape, different cone formation. This is more your traditional style, and yeah, more the old school Primus type flame pattern. This is what I thought. I thought it would be like the Primus, but it certainly gets hot enough. Let's try this bit of what looks like 3mm on a bit of 1mm. It's a fair test. Now the Bullfinch would do that. I'll use some 1.6mm rod, so we're not going to ask too much of it. With some easy 303. Let's give it a go. Now that's the sort of performance you'd get out of a primus. It will melt the rod, beat it, but then it won't flow. Now if I attack that with the Bullfinch, it will melt that like nothing. So I will, to show the difference in the torches. Now that's the difference, it's chalk and cheese. And as you saw, I had the torch flame right in close because that is the hottest part of the gun. It's nothing like the old style triple and double cones. That is what that torch has got, which is exactly what the Primus has got. So I would say that and the Primus I showed you earlier are brother and sister. It's just a regular standard LPG torch that, you know, it's nothing special, but this is something special. This will do a fantastic job, as you can see. And it did it in seconds. So we'll try it on a bit of copper and sitting on a brick for insulation. I'm going to use what's known as yellow tip in Australia, which is plumber's silver solder, which has got, I don't know, 10% silver in it. It's about as cheap as you can get, 5–10%. And we'll use a bit of the old Easy Weld 303 flax. We won't put anything onto it because it's not really important. As long as we get some flow is the main thing. So, yeah, will it flow? That's the proof of the pudding. Let's do it. No problem. So for silver solder, for plumbing, great torch. Yeah, perfect. It would do the job no problem at all. So the home handyman, or anybody that wants to rush out and buy really expensive silver solder with a 90 very high silver content, well then you can braze or silver solder carbide bits onto tooling with this, I expect, and certainly it will do any sort of copper or brass joining that you care to throw at it, no problem. All right, we've got two old buggered nails, and I'll try and join them with some 1.6 manganese bronze. It might do it, it might, we'll see. there you go, it did it. It's not a patch on the Bullfinch. But for model work, model making, provided the mass is not too high, it's going to be quite usable. Alright. I did move the torch in closer too. It's hard to judge the flame position because I've never, this is all new. I'll get that bit of junk back and we'll see if we can melt it again by moving the torch in on it. Okay, we'll have it on the brick, which will also concentrate the heat as well. So, this is going to be the best it's going to do, really. But it might do it, we'll see. So yeah, if you do it on a brick to trap the heat, it will manganese bronze braze, no problem. Well, no doubt about it. It's not as good as the Bullfinch, but of course, for a tenth of the price, what do you expect? You need to play around with it and just see where the best spot is. I found that the torch was best about, I reckon, about this distance. You just have to judge the redness. One drawback with this torch is that your hand is fairly close to the heat source and you can feel a lot of reflected heat. You really want to wear a leather glove when you use this, whereas the Bullfinch, the nozzle is a lot longer and your hand's well away from the heat source. But apart from that, it can do smallish jobs. I had to heat that metal for quite a while to get it to separate, but it did melt it. It just took time. And once again, as I said, it's no Bullfinch, but it's a step up on the primers. The primers may even do this sort of work, but the flame on that is a lot bigger and woollier. I'll see if the primers will actually separate these nails. I'll heat it with a big torch and just see if it can actually melt the bronze. Well, the primers did it, so really I have to revise my appraisal of the Banggood torch. It's basically the same as the primers, the old style primers. If you've got a half or a brick backing to concentrate the heat, you can actually braze with it, but there's a hell of a lot of flame going everywhere. You can't really do precision work with it, and anything with a lot of mass is not going to be any good at all. But yeah, so at the end of it all, it's basically a Banggood version of the primers, these old torches, and the fancy head, fancy nozzle doesn't really throw out, I don't think, any more heat than the primers, although it is more concentrated, so you can control it a lot more. Well, that's just about the end of the review. Before I finish up, I'll just mention a couple of things. One is that this is a companion brand torch, not a Primus. It pretty much identical, same sort of burner heads. So anyway, just to clarify that, they're both in the 1970s, you know, era. And this torch here, I'm going to take the end off and see what's inside, see what makes this tick, and maybe find out why the piezo auto ignition's not working. Maybe it's, you know, not adjusted up properly or something. So anyway, we'll get a screwdriver and we'll pull this thing apart and see what's in there. Should be interesting. Well, I've pulled the cover off. There's a ceramic cylinder goes in there. It's only held on with one screw, that one there. And inside we've got just a diffuser. Nothing really high tech at all. And that just basically breaks up the big, what would be one big flame, into a whole bunch of smaller flames within the big flame. So it does concentrate the heat, as you saw, but the igniter's not igniting. It's supposed to jump across from there to there, so there's obviously something wrong in here. I'm not going to pull that apart because that would probably destroy it. So I'll just put it back together and use it as it is with the flint lighter, which is no big deal, but if you buy one, you know, something, you expect it to all work, but obviously that's not happening. Well, check this out, guys. I don't know what I did, but it's actually working now. The magic touch. Rob's got the magic touch. Can you believe that? So there you go. Maybe it wasn't grounding properly. I don't know. Maybe the little grub screw that holds the diffuser wasn't making a proper contact, you know, because it would have to ground back. But anyway, I just pulled it apart, put it back together and tied everything up properly. And she's a goer. How good is that, huh? Bloody miracle. There you go. That's it. I hope you found it interesting. Yeah. Not a bad little torch, actually. Not a lot of money. You just have to price around and see what you think, whether that's, you know, what you want. But yeah, it's quite a useful little thing, really. All right. I think I've been pretty fair on this review, and yeah, I hope it gives you some ideas, and you can see just what the difference is in these torches. But yeah, one of the more interesting reviews I've done lately. Okay, that's it for me. See you next time. Cheers.